In the quiet suburbs of the Philippines, a loving family opened their hearts and home to an orphan teenager. What followed was a tale of jealousy, manipulation, and calculated revenge that shocked an entire nation. Welcome to today's episode of True Crimes Unfold. Please note that the descriptions of events and scenarios in this video may be disturbing for some viewers. Discretion is advised. Details of the videos are taken from actual case files. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and the next true crime destination we should explore, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. Also, don't forget to subscribe to get new stories as soon as they're released daily. Now settle in, get ready, and let's begin. Gather around, friends. The fire's getting low, and I've got a story that'll make you question everything you know about family bonds. It's about the darkest kind of betrayal, the kind that comes from someone you've given everything to. December 10th, 2021. It was one of those bright, cheerful Philippine mornings that gave no hint of the horror to come. The kind where sunshine streams through windows in golden ribbons, and the air carries the sweet scent of breakfast being prepared in countless homes. But in one particular house, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, a teenage girl was about to shatter the perfect illusion she'd helped create. Picture this. Cruz Maguad, a respected elementary school teacher, kisses his wife Illa goodbye as they head to work. Their adopted daughter, Janice, calls them mom and dad for the first time that morning. Their hearts soar with joy, unaware that these words are not a milestone of love, but a signal for something far more sinister. Let me take you back 3 months earlier, when the Maguad household was the very picture of familial bliss. Cruz and Illa, their 2 biological children, 16-year-old Louis and 18-year-old Gwen, and the newly adopted daughter, 17-year-old Janice. They lived in a modest home with a small pig farm out back. The kind of place where family photos lined the walls and the smell of home-cooked meals filled the air every evening. But if you looked closer, if you paid attention to the shadows in the corners of those family photos, you'd see something wasn't quite right. In every picture, Janice's eyes held a peculiar gleam. When Gwen and Louis received praise from their parents, the adopted girl's smile never quite reached those eyes. She'd stand in doorways, watching the family interact, her head tilted slightly, like a predator studying its prey. There were signs, of course. There always are. Like the time Cruz's emergency fund of some $200 vanished, only to be found hidden in a secret compartment in Janice's backpack. The family chose to see it as a cry for help from a traumatized child. They didn't realize it was just a test, a small experiment to see how far their forgiveness would stretch. Janice's background was a tapestry of tragedy, or so everyone thought. Found alone on a cargo ship at age 8, bouncing between homes as a live-in maid, never knowing the stability of a real family. The Maguads thought they were writing a new chapter in her story. They didn't know they were actually reading from a script she had carefully crafted. In those 3 months, Janice became the perfect daughter. She helped with chores without being asked. She studied with Gwen, laughed at Louis' jokes, and seemed to bloom under the warmth of the Maguad's love. But at night, when the house was quiet, she would sit at her window, scrolling through her phone, messaging someone named Marlin. Their conversations had anyone seen them, would have frozen the blood in their veins. 7 souls, one message read. God will forgive me if I repent. The timestamp showed 3 a.m., while the family slept peacefully, unaware of the darkness brewing under their roof. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You see, what makes this story truly terrifying isn't just what Janice did. It's how perfectly she played her role. How she made the Mugwats believe they were saving her, when all along she was plotting their destruction. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, she didn't just wear the disguise. She lived it, breathed it, made everyone believe it was real. That bright December morning, when she finally called them Mom and Dad, wasn't the beginning of a new chapter. It was the end of the story she'd let them believe, and the start of a nightmare none of them saw coming. But before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and seen nothing looking back? Because that's what Illa Mugwat would later say about Janice. Not anger, not hatred, just a void where a soul should be. You know what's fascinating about darkness? It doesn't always come all at once. Sometimes it creeps in so slowly, you don't notice until it's too late. That's how it was with Janice. Let me tell you about the weeks leading up to that fatal December morning. Remember that cargo ship I mentioned? The one where 8-year-old Janice was found? Well, here's something the adoption papers didn't show. She wasn't lost. She wasn't abandoned. She was waiting. Even then, she knew how to play the part of the helpless child. The social workers who found her described a small girl with tear-stained cheeks, clutching a worn teddy bear, the perfect picture of innocence. But there was another side to Janice's story, one that lived in the shadows of her social media accounts, where she maintained contact with her very much alive biological mother, Michelle. You see, while the Mugwats thought they were giving an orphan a second chance, Janice was orchestrating an elaborate performance. In her private messages with Marlin, a troubled church maintenance boy she'd met through mutual acquaintances, Janice's true nature began to surface. "They treat me like charity," one message read. "Even their love feels like pity." Each message grew darker, more twisted, like watching poison spread through clear water. Let me tell you about a particular night in November, just weeks before the tragedy. Gwen, the eldest Mugwat child, woke up around midnight to get a glass of water. As she passed Janice's room, she heard whispering. Through the crack in the door, she saw her adopted sister standing in front of her mirror, practicing something over and over. "Mom, Dad," Janice whispered, tears streaming down her face. But when she wiped them away, Gwen saw something that would haunt her until her final day. A smile. Not the warm, gentle smile they'd grown used to, but something else. Something hollow. The Mugwat house itself seemed to sense the growing darkness. Things began to disappear. Small things at first. A kitchen knife here, a baseball bat there. Cruz's antique hammer vanished from his toolbox. When questioned, Janice would help search for hours, offering comforting words and suggestions. No one thought to check the false bottom she'd crafted in her closet. But the most chilling part? The practice runs. Security cameras from neighboring houses would later show Janice testing different routes to and from the house, timing herself, studying the family's routines. She knew exactly when Cruz would be teaching his favorite class. when Illa would be tied up in administrative meetings. The relationship with Marlin deepened during this time. They would meet in the church after hours, their whispered conversations echoing in the empty sanctuary. Marlin, with his own troubled past and growing obsession with Janice, became her willing apprentice. Together, they planned what Janice called her purification, the elimination of everything standing between her and complete possession of the Magwad family's love and resources. In her diary, later found hidden in a hollow Bible, Janice had written something particularly disturbing. 7 souls stand between me and peace. God forgives those who repent, but first, the sacrifice must be made. The pages that followed contained detailed drawings of the house's layout, marked with red X's and timestamps. December arrived like a wolf in sheep's clothing, bringing with it the cheerful buzz of holiday preparations. The Magwads, planning their first Christmas as a complete family, filled the house with decorations and joy. Janice helped bake cookies, hung stockings, and even asked to say grace at dinner. Her performance was flawless. But in the dead of night, when the house slept, she would slip out of bed and practice. Practice walking silently down the hallway. Practice opening doors without a sound. Practice other things. The security camera in the kitchen caught her one night, standing motionless for hours, just staring at the knife block. As December 10th approached, there was one final piece to her puzzle. That morning, when she called Cruz and Illa mom and dad for the first time, it wasn't a breakthrough. It was a signal. A text message sent moments later simply read, "It's time." The stage was set. The actors were in place. And as Cruz and Illa drove away that morning, their hearts full of joy at their daughter's apparent emotional breakthrough, they had no way of knowing. They had just heard the opening lines of a horror story that would shake their community to its core. But before I tell you about the bloodshed that followed, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered how many masks a person can wear before they forget their true face? Because what happened next? Well, that's where our story turns from unsettling to truly nightmarish. Now, this is where our story turns dark. Really dark. The kind of darkness that makes you question human nature itself. Let me take you through the events of December 10th, 2021. A day that started with hope and ended in horror. 2 p.m. The sun hung high over the Magwad residence, casting deceptively cheerful shadows through the windows. Louis was strumming his guitar in the living room, the melody of a love song floating through the house. Gwen sat nearby, highlighting her medical textbooks, occasionally humming along. Neither noticed the shadow that passed by the window. Marlin, making his final approach. 2:15 p.m., Janice, who had been unusually quiet all morning, received a text message. Just 2 words. "I'm here." She walked to her room, opened her closet, and removed the false bottom she'd crafted weeks ago. Inside lay her tools. Items collected slowly, methodically, over the past months. 2:30 p.m. The first knock at the door was so normal, so innocuous. Louis, ever the welcoming soul, set down his guitar. "I'll get it," he called out, his voice carrying that characteristic warmth he was known for. The security camera would later show his last smile as he opened the door. What happened next was a symphony of violence that I'll spare you the worst details of. But know this. When Marlin entered, He wasn't alone. Two others, their faces covered, pushed their way in. But they weren't strangers. No, they were just Marlin's friends, paid to make it look like a home invasion. Gwen, hearing her brother's sudden cry, ran into the living room, her medical textbook still clutched in her hands, highlighting markers leaving a neon streak across the floor as it fell. She fought. Oh, how she fought. The defensive wounds on her hands would later tell a story of desperate courage. 2:48 p.m. As chaos erupted downstairs, Janice sat in her room, sending that now infamous message to the family group chat. Help! Intruders in the house. But notice the timestamp. Almost 50 minutes after the initial attack began. Notice the emojis she used. The carefully crafted panic. All part of her performance. The living room, once a place of family gatherings and laughter, became a canvas of horror. The investigators would later document every detail. The shattered vases, the blood-stained baseball bat, the knife missing its handle, the overturned furniture. But what struck them most was the precision of it all. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. 3 p.m. Janice made her social media post crying for help. But here's what the public didn't know. Between her messages, she was directing traffic, telling Marlin where to move, what to take, how to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, all while listening to her siblings' final moments. The evidence would later show that Gwen's last act was trying to reach her sister's room. Her fingerprints were found on the wall leading up the stairs, as if she was trying to warn Janice, to save her. She didn't know that she was climbing towards the architect of her own destruction. 3:30 p.m. Marlin and his accomplices left, taking with them carefully selected items to support the robbery narrative. Janice waited exactly 17 minutes, counting each second, before running to the bathroom. When crews would find her later, she would be soaked from the shower, washing away any evidence, she would claim. Washing away her sins, the truth would reveal. But here's the detail that haunts me most. During the investigation, they found Janice's phone had been recording the entire time. Not for evidence, not for memory, but as a trophy. The audio file was never released to the public, but those who heard it spoke of something chilling. In the background, beneath the chaos, someone was humming. A lullaby. Cruz Magwad's arrival home would mark the beginning of the next phase, the discovery. But before we get to that part of our tale, let me share something the investigators found in Janice's diary, written just hours before the attack. Today, they called me daughter. Today, I'll make sure I'm their only one. The sun was still shining when Cruz pulled into his driveway. Birds were still singing. The world outside had no idea that inside those walls, everything had changed. But that, my friends, is where our story turns even darker. The thing about truth, it's like a body in a shallow grave. No matter how well you think you've buried it, pieces always find their way to the surface. Let me tell you about the investigation that followed. Cruz's discovery of his children's bodies was just the beginning. As police tape went up around the Magwad residence, turning a home into a crime scene, investigators began to notice inconsistencies. First were the weapons: a blood-stained baseball bat, kitchen knives, a hammer, all family possessions. Strange choice for random burglars to use, wouldn't you say? Professional criminals typically bring their own tools, but these were personal weapons, chosen for their familiarity. Then there was the brutality. 51 stab wounds on Louis's body. Gwen's face deliberately mutilated. The missing ear, a trophy taken. One detective, a 20-year veteran, had to step outside when he saw the crime scene photos. "This isn't robbery," he said. "This is rage. Personal rage." But it was the bathroom that first made them suspicious. You see, when someone showers after witnessing a crime, it's usually from shock or trauma. But Janice's shower? It was methodical. The investigators found traces of blood in the drain trap. Small amounts, easily explained away. But why would an innocent witness have blood to wash off? The breakthrough came 3 days into the investigation. A local shopkeeper approached the police. He remembered something odd. A teenage boy asking directions to the Magwad house that morning. Security footage showed him clearly. Marlin carrying a backpack that would later be found empty in a ditch, save for one crucial item, Gwen's phone. But the real horror lay in the digital evidence. You see, teenagers leave breadcrumbs everywhere these days. Social media, text messages, search histories. Janice's phone, which she willingly handed over to police, thinking she'd deleted everything incriminating, became her undoing. Data recovery revealed deleted messages between her and Marlin. Plans, diagrams of the house, screenshots of family photos with 2 faces methodically crossed out. But most disturbing were the videos, dozens of them, of her practicing her panic reaction in front of her mirror. Take after take, perfecting her performance of the traumatized survivor. The investigation took another turn when Mrs. Magwad, finally allowed back into her home to collect clothes, found something in Janice's room. Hidden inside a stuffed animal, the kind no teenager would normally keep, was a journal. Not the diary of a frightened girl, but a manifesto. Pages filled with calculations, not of mathematics, but of murder. Day 73, one entry read, "They love me, but not enough. Never enough. Always them first. Gwen with her medical school dreams. Louis with his music. They don't understand. In a family, there can only be one favorite child." The final pieces came together when they found Marlin's friends, paid accomplices. They broke easily under questioning. They thought they were just helping stage a robbery, they claimed. They didn't know about the knives, the bat, the hammer. They didn't know about Janice's real plan. But here's the detail that still haunts the investigators. In Janice's room, they found a calendar. December 10th was circled in red with a simple note. Rebirth. The day she called them mom and dad wasn't a breakthrough. It was a goodbye. A cruel parody of the family moment they'd all been waiting for. The evidence mounted like shadows at sunset. Each new discovery darker than the last. But the true horror wasn't in what they found. It was in what it revealed about the human capacity for deception. About how well monsters can wear the mask of innocence. But before I tell you about the trial that followed, about how justice finally caught up with Janice and Marlin, let me share one last detail that the official reports never mentioned. In that stuffed animal, alongside the journal, they found something else. A family photo taken just weeks before. Everyone was smiling. Everyone looked happy. But Janice had modified it, carefully cutting out every face except her own. They say the hardest part of any tragedy is the aftermath. The moment when the police tape comes down, the cameras leave, and those left behind have to somehow find a way to live with what happened. But in this case, the aftermath held horrors all its own. The trial was set for early January 2022. Due to their ages, both Janice and Marlon were tried as juveniles, a fact that would later spark public outrage. But it was during pre-trial psychological evaluation that the true depth of Janice's nature emerged. The court-appointed psychiatrist found something chilling. Not the presence of mental illness, but its absence. No trauma response, no dissociation, just clear, calculated intent. Patient shows remarkable clarity about her actions, the report read. She speaks of the murders not with remorse or pleasure, but with the detachment of someone describing a mundane task. When asked about her motivations, she simply stated, "In nature, when resources are limited, the strongest survive." The trial itself was closed to the public, but those who were present speak of something unsettling. Throughout the proceedings, Janice maintained perfect composure, breaking character only once, when Cruz and Illa Maguad took the stand. For a brief moment, observers say, her mask slipped, revealing not anger or hatred, but something worse, satisfaction. The sentences came down like hammer blows. 10 years for assaulting Gwen, 22 years for murdering Louis. But here's where the story takes its final dark turn. The juvenile detention system, designed for rehabilitation, wasn't prepared for someone like Janice. 3 weeks into her incarceration, Illa Maguad requested a meeting with her adopted daughter. The guards would later say they tried to talk her out of it. But Illa, still searching for answers, still trying to understand, insisted. What happened in that visiting room? Well, let me share Illa's own words from her interview afterward. "I looked into her eyes, searching for the girl we'd loved, the child we'd tried to save. But what looked back at me? It wasn't human." She smiled. Not her practiced perfect smile, but something else. And she said, "I would do it all again. Because now, you'll never forget me." The case files note that Janice keeps a calendar in her cell. Every December 10th is marked with a small star. The guards have learned not to ask why, but one reported hearing her humming on those days. The same lullaby that played in the background of her trophy recording. Cruz and Illa Maguad left their home behind, unable to live with the echoes of what happened there. The house stands empty now, though neighbors say they sometimes see lights in Janice's old room at night. Police investigations find nothing, of course, just shadows and memories. But here's the detail that haunts me most, the one I've saved for last. When they cleared out Janice's juvenile detention cell for routine inspection last month, they found something scratched into the wall behind her bed. Not a message of remorse, not a plea for forgiveness, but a simple tally mark. And next to it, in small, neat letters, "First family complete, 6 more to go." They say the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones that can smile and laugh and say, "I love you," while plotting unspeakable things. The Maguad case reminds us that sometimes the greatest horror isn't in what we can see, but in what we can't. The darkness that lives behind innocent eyes. So tonight, when you go home, when you lock your doors and check on your sleeping children, remember this. Sometimes the monsters don't hide under the bed. Sometimes they're lying in it, counting down the days until their next performance. And somewhere, in a juvenile detention center, a girl who was never really an orphan watches the calendar, plans her appeal, and waits. Because some stories, my friends, never truly end. They just wait for the next chapter.